Hey everybody, Dennis Scholl here from Oolite Arts. Got a great panel today all about how to work with an art advisor. And we've got two great guests. I'm really excited about having them here. They come from very different places to wind up as art advisors, and they're both very, very knowledgeable. First, I'm joined by Christina Warner, who came her way kind of through the ranks, working at places like Citibank Art Advisory, where I actually met my friend Jeffrey Deitch for the first time. She then worked at Christie's Auction House, and then spent a bunch of time working for the Nahmed family, which is really maybe the biggest players in the contemporary art world. So Christina, thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Dennis, for having me. It's such a pleasure, and I'm honored to be on this panel with Karen. Just to give you a little background on me, I mean, as you mentioned, I started sort of my career at Citibank Art Advisory, and then moved on to Christie's and working for the Nahmed family for about 8 years in Impressionist and Modern, and their collection is quite extensive. And as you mentioned, they're rather significant players within both the modern and contemporary art world. And then from there, what? Sorry?
I just said rather, yes. Rather.
Yes. And then from there, moved on to working for a Latin American art gallery. And now currently I have my own art advisory as of 3 years ago, at the last 3 years. And it has been an absolute pleasure because I've actually became interested in art advisory from my first job at Citibank Art Advisory. I just wanted to build relationships with clients and educate clients and be able to be representing them in buying and selling, and also working with some corporations as well. So that's been sort of a mix of what I've been doing. And we can go into further detail as we keep discussing.
Fantastic. And then we're joined by my friend Karen Boyer, who, Karen, you came at this from a very different angle. Like me, you were a lawyer for a while, then you were in the business world, working in the hedge fund world, and then you woke up one day and you were an art advisor. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple, but my mom is an artist, and I grew up in Los Angeles, always being surrounded by art and going to museums and galleries with my family. And I studied art at Berkeley in college, not to work in the art business, but just because I loved it. In fact, I don't even think I knew there was an art business when I was in college. And then I lived in Paris for a year and studied art history at the Sorbonne, which was amazing. We did field trips every week to the Louvre or Musée d'Orsay. And then I moved to New York, and as you pointed out, I was a lawyer, and I joined many different museum groups, MoMA, Whitney, the Met, and met a lot of collectors and art professionals and started getting interested in the art business. And then I went into the hedge fund business. I used to raise money for hedge funds. And in 2002, I came to the first Art Basel in Miami, and I ended up buying a piece of art just sort of on a whim. And as you know, Dennis, it's all downhill from there.
It's a slippery slope for sure.
So I started collecting art, and I started spending more and more, and then what became all of my free time looking at art and traveling with the museum groups around the world and to fairs and exhibitions and art trips to Cuba and Mexico City and various places. And I just loved art so much that I decided to leave finance and go into the art world. So I worked at a gallery, and then sort of similar to Christina, I really wanted to work with clients, and I knew a lot of people from the hedge fund business that wanted me to help them buy art, and I didn't feel that it was right to work at a gallery and still recommend art from other galleries. So I left and started my own advisory business a little over 11 years ago, and it's been really great. And I lived in New York for a long time and moved here to Miami 3 years ago, which has been amazing.
Well, we're glad you're here. You've been a really big part of our art scene from the minute you arrived, and you're very involved down here, just like you were up in the city. I guess the thing that people wonder about, first of all, when I talk to people, they ask me this question all the time, and that is, why would someone elect to work with an art advisor? And I have two answers. One is very positive and the other one is very negative. And my answers would be, the positive part is access. You know, people don't understand how competitive it is to be a collector in the art world and to get access to certain things that you want. You don't get to walk into the gallery and point and say, I want that one, you know, because what they say to you is it's not available. What they mean, though, is it's not available to you. Because if you're not known in the art world, access to material becomes very different. And on the negative side, I always say that caveat emptor, which is one of the few Latin phrases I know, and that is let the buyer beware. The art world is a very unregulated industry. It's a large unregulated industry, and it's pretty easy to make a mistake. And for me, you guys help avoid expensive mistakes. So I would love to hear from each of you. Christina, we'll start with you. Why would someone elect to work with an art advisor?
Well, I think your answers were sort of right on the mark. I mean, I think that access is definitely one thing that is key for I would say both veteran and new buyers, just because they don't, with a new buyer, they might not understand sort of the inner workings and the relationships that are built. And kind of an advisor works as a liaison to sort of smooth and build those relationships for them, and also not only grant them the access, but also be able to negotiate a better price and to be able to get discounts that they might not be able to get. So there's those relationships, and then access to different fairs, different artistic venues, museums, private tours within museums. That's also another reason with regards to access. But I know that there's a wide range of why people want to work with art advisors to begin with. Like, it could be to help with an appraisal for an estate. It could be to start an art collection. It could be for educational purposes because they just want to learn about art and just start from there. So, I mean, there's sort of a wide range of what one can do. And sort of those are various services that I provide currently for different clients. I have, examples of clients where we started off, 15 years ago, and they knew nothing about art. And it was when I was working at Namad that one said to me, do I have to spend $250,000 to be able to walk into this gallery? And I said, no. I mean, it's a fantastic theory, but that's unrealistic. And no, that's not how it works. And he actually, because of that, he inspired me to do a series of pop-up themed contemporary art shows with price points between, about $2,000 to $20,000. And from there, he started buying. And now we have had this relationship for over 15 years where he's continuously sort of gradually bought more and more and built quite a nice collection. So that's sort of, I would say.
Karen, why would somebody decide to work with you? What are the leading reasons that people make this decision?
Well, Christina touched upon this a little bit, but education is a really big part of it. And I work with a lot of people that have never bought art before, or never really any sort of meaningful way. Maybe they bought art on vacation or something like that, but people don't really know where to get art or what the process looks like and how the art market works. So it's a lot of education before people start making acquisitions. And then also, as Christina said, we negotiate prices and then get the works installed in their homes, which is not exactly a seamless process, as anybody that's ever bought art knows. So it's a lot of work on that front. I've also worked with people that used to have time to collect art on their own, but they've had children or their work gets really involved and they just don't have time to look at everything on their own. So I help bring them opportunities that I think would fit into their collection that they have already to help it grow in a positive way. I also do, well, not only me, but art advisors also help people find things that they can't find on their own on the secondary market. If they're looking for certain artists, and that goes back to the access, but I find things for people that are on someone else's wall and convince them to sell them, which is not something most people can do on their own. But because we're out in the field and we travel a lot to art fairs and we talk to dealers all the time. We know where things are and what's available, and we're able to help our clients acquire those.
Yeah, I often get the phone call because I wind up acting as an informal, uncompensated art advisor for many of my friends. And I often get the phone call from Hawaii, and they say, we're in this great gallery and there's this work of art and it's $30,000, but they're giving it to us for $14,000. And I say, do you have a Mai Tai in your hand right now? I said, yeah, how did you know? I said, I want you to turn around and move straight to the exit from the gallery. And I want you to run out the door. I mean, it's amazing what people will do on vacation and how much bad things can happen in the art world from that. So, I think one of the things that...
But I just want to say one thing. I think as a rule of thumb to anybody, if a gallery is offering you a 50% discount, it's not worth it.
Yes,
I think agree with that, Karen, very much so. It's not a good sign if you're already starting there. You should be.
If you don't know what something should cost, you probably shouldn't buy it. Exactly right. So, I think that what people don't understand is that being an art advisor isn't walking into a gallery with somebody and pointing over there to the client and saying, hey, buy this one, don't buy that one. There is so much more involved. You guys touched upon it, but you've got to deal with shipping. You've got to deal with appraisals. You've got to deal with how to manage the collection. You got to deal with payment. You got to deal with restoration sometimes. All of these points that become, your responsibility sometimes. And so maybe you could each talk about the process from start to finish of choosing one work of art for a client. How would that happen? What would happen? Christina, why don't you start?
How would it happen? Well, I think how it starts, I can give a particular scenario I'm working on currently for a client who just recently bought a second home during COVID and wanted to get out of the city. And she's now looking for art for various rooms in the house and has a fair, a nice art collection to begin with, but is sort of looking to expand upon that. And how we would start, or how we've started, is sort of that we start by an initial conversation over the phone, sort of getting to know one another, learning about her collection, learning what her expectations are, just in broad strokes. And then from there, what I would do is I would send her a initial proposal of how sort of I work and what we discussed and the various steps that would be involved, go from start to finish, meaning that we would, that there would be this initial call. Then the next step would be for me to come and see the work. If pre-COVID times, obviously now maybe going back to this, but to be able to physically see her work that she currently owns, to better understand her tastes. And if that's not possible, to do like a video conference where she walks me through and shows me the work or sends me photos. Any of those have seemed to work. And then from there, after collecting all of that information, then I'll go on to prepare and start sourcing material that I feel would align with the work she already has, and start presenting her with these various proposals, and start from like a rather large selection and narrow it down and continue to refine over the course of a few weeks or however long it needs to be. And then from there, we would actually view the various works and decide on the transaction, purchase the work, and more than likely I would negotiate some sort of discount or have that already in place. And then the purchase would happen, the shipment would take place, and the installation of the actual work. And that would be sort of from start to finish.
Yeah. Karen, how was it different for you these last 15 months in terms of that start to finish opportunity?
Well, the first 3 months of COVID, there was nothing to do. It was kind of a scary time, but similar to other parts of the world, after the first few months, people realized that they were okay. Wealthy people have gotten wealthier, and there's been a lot of money being spent in the art business, and people have been home staring at their walls, whether they're empty or full, but want to change things up. And so it's been very busy, but the biggest change has been that I have not been able to see people or a lot of art in person. I always recommend that people look at art in person, because no matter how many photos you have, you still don't know exactly how you'll feel standing in front of it. And even if you have the dimensions, the scale is always different, as are the colors when you're standing in front of it. I have had clients buy things in the past without looking at it in person, but at least I look at it in person. But during COVID, that's been really difficult. Clients have wanted to buy art and no one's been able to see anything. So we've done a number of transactions without looking at the art in person. Although I will say that the vast majority of them have been artists that we knew. So we've seen the work before.
That's the key, really. Yeah.
It makes it better, and buying also from galleries that I trust and I know, and if something gets delivered and it's not right, they will typically let me return it and get something that everybody's happy with. So I have done a lot of transactions without looking at art in person, and I've also, similar to what Christina touched upon, done a number of FaceTime viewings of FaceTime installations, which was a first for me to do a FaceTime installation, but not being able to really travel or go into people's homes has made it a little more challenging. And the use of the video has become very prominent in the art business because, again, there's only so much you can get from photos, but now everything is sold with a video. So you have to get into a storage facility sometimes and have an art handler make a video. So that's been a very big difference.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So let's say that somebody like me is interested in working with an advisor and we're trying to understand the art world and it's very confusing. How would one, the idea of money is always a big issue in the art world. It kind of drives the art world quietly. We all talk about aesthetics, but the underbelly of the art world is money. So how would somebody retain you? How does that work? Karen, how would I hire you? What would I ask for? What would it cost in broad strokes? That kind of thing. Is it a percentage basis? How does it all work?
Well, every art advisor does something different, as far as I can tell. There's no real rule book of art advisory. However, I belong to the Association of Professional Art Advisors, which is based in New York, and we have tried to set standards and we have a code of ethics. And one of the things that's very important for us is that our clients pay us directly. So I have a contract that all my clients sign. They pay me an upfront fee and then a percentage, a commission on works that they buy. And I work for them. And so when I go to a gallery, I don't get paid by the gallery. That has been known to happen in the past, that some people want.
Once or twice.
But I would get kicked out of the APAA if I was paid by a gallery, and I wouldn't want to do that anyway because I feel like I have a fiduciary duty, going back to my legal training, to my clients. So when I meet somebody for the first time, we do go over that, but also go over what is important for me to know is what their collecting goals are, what their overall budget is, what their timeline is, so that I know that I can do a good job. If they want to fill a 4-bedroom apartment in 2 weeks, that's probably going to be too quick for me. But if they want to buy one thing in the next 2 years, that's going to be too slow. So we have to make sure that we're on the same page. And then I also, again, want to understand exactly what their goals are so that when I start offering them work, it will be within their budget, within their timeline, and within their aesthetic and exactly what they're trying to accomplish.
Christina, how do you work your relationship with your clients from an economic standpoint?
Thank you. Oh, well, I have to say, Karen, you took the words right out of my mouth. We have in that sense, very, very similar style. I would say it's that initial conversation, as I was saying, whether it's in the actual over the phone or in the contract that I send them, it clearly states sort of how I break it down, where if it's based on a monthly retainer or hourly, I definitely want to clarify that from day one, because everyone has different budgets, different expectations. And as Karen was, mentioning, which is very true, that each client, being that there's different expectations, some clients have, can take 6 months, some clients need it in a month or 2 weeks. And so those variables are, obviously fluctuate and also depend upon, like that's where the budget and the sort of the expenses, I would say not the expenses rather, but where the fees would differ in that sense, so.
Is the, no, please go
sorry.
ahead.
No, that's it. That's all.
I was going to ask, is the commission percentage different if somebody's buying a $50,000 piece versus a $500,000 piece? And either of you can answer that, or both of you.
Yes, I do it. It's a sliding scale.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I also clearly state that in the contract to begin with, even if they're not purchasing a work for, more than $10,000, I clearly just state that so that it's upfront and it's stated from day one and there's no confusion, because as you were mentioning before, there's a lot of like ambiguity and, there's a lot of, I would say, uncertainty when people are being introduced into the art world and they're not sure as to how to navigate it. And I think that by having it clearly stated, it's just much easier to understand and then kind of process as we go along. So,
yeah, I would agree with that. So what level of activity would a collector need to be operating at in order to qualify as a client? What kind of activity do they have to be maintaining to make it worthwhile for them to use an advisor and to make it worthwhile for you guys? Karen?
Well, it depends really what people want. As I mentioned before, a big part of what I do is education. And I also recommend that people look at a lot of art before making purchases, because I want them to be happy in 3 days and 3 months and 3 years. So if they see something and then buy it, but 3 months later, after they've seen a lot of other art, they realize they don't like that style or whatever as much.
I own one work from the first 5 years of art collecting.
Wow.
I still have one work.
Wow.
Yeah. It changes fast, particularly in the beginning when the learning curve is so steep. Your aesthetic changes dramatically, your connoisseurship changes dramatically. So that's a very thoughtful thing to say. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that.
Very important. So if you want to learn and have somebody to teach you, I think that's a good time to start engaging with an art advisor. And then obviously if you want to make purchases and you have walls. For me, there does need to be a certain level and price that people are transacting at to make it worth it for us to work together. But that is, again, the initial conversation that we have to make sure that we're aligned in that way.
Yeah. Christina, any amplification of that? Any thoughts about that?
Any thoughts? I would say that the education, as Karen was saying, that education is key especially for new collectors. I think you benefit so much from just going to museums, even buying art books, just reading, learning. And I mean, it would be part of the relationship that we would develop, is to be able to introduce them to a wide range of art as well, not only creating these proposals. That would be sort of a second or third step. The initial step would be sort of just to expose them to as much art as possible, and then have them engage and respond to the art. And it's an evolution, really, as you were saying, Dennis, that it's if you're working on a collection for 20 years, it's really evolves with time. And that's sort of the exciting part of a collection, is that it's constantly growing and changing and developing. You don't really want it to remain stagnant. That's just because a person changes over time. So that's what makes it so appealing. I think the initial idea of getting some education in regards to just sort of getting your feet wet and being introduced to the art world is a smart start. So,
I used to say that I don't work with advisors, and then I began my Aboriginal Australian contemporary art collection, and I said, well, I bought lots and lots of art. I can do this too, and I did it for about a year, and I looked up and I was like, boy, if I'm going to really commit to this and I'm going to really go big in it, which is generally what we do with a new collection, I said, I actually going to have some help. I can do all the research in the world, but it's a very complex area of the art world. And it was even more of a free-for-all than the art world that we operate in is. And I actually wound up getting help. And I got to say, it didn't cost me a thing because I got better. You know, the thing that people don't understand is you guys will get them things they never get otherwise that wind up being crass and talking about the economics of it, that wind up appreciating dramatically. So I have found that if you're using an advisor and you're operating at a pretty high level, it doesn't cost you anything. The work that you get from an advisor's access is well worth the access that you get. I haven't needed that in our contemporary art world, but boy, did I need it down in Australia. I was in trouble. It was really complex. So I want to ask you guys, so December's coming. We're definitely going to have Art Basel Miami Beach. I'm confident of it. Is that just pure chaos for you guys, racing up and down the aisles? And how do you balance client demand on those days? What's that like for you, Christina?
Client demand. Well, I would say that I'm a bit of a planner just by my own nature. So I try to plan out the entire week as much as I possibly can. And I try it every year, but I also know by having been going to the Art Basel Miami for now, who knows how long. It's been a while, since 2002. So I feel like it's been an experience where every year I've learned a little more and saying, okay, well, this day I will dedicate to the main art fair, and I have these X clients that are going to be looking at the main art fair. And then the other day, sort of depending upon which art fair I'm going to, other satellite fairs, and for clients, I will dedicate the time to those clients. But it's squeezing in the events, the lectures, and other things that I always try to do. But it's 50-50 when those things can actually happen, just because you never really know how the day is going to unfold and who you're going to be spending more time with or how long things are going to take. And so I've now learned that you just kind of allow yourself blocks of time with each client and kind of go from there.
I also think you evidenced about moving from fair to fair. I also think that some fairs are better for some clients and other fairs are better for other clients, depending on where they are in the life cycle of being a collector. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Completely. I completely agree with that. I mean, I actually have a lot of clients that I tell them not to go to the main fair first. I say, go to the other fairs and then the main fair. And before even going to the main fair, I tell them we go to galleries, some of the galleries that are in New York. I'll go to the galleries first to see the work that's going to be exhibited at the fair, because sometimes the price at the gallery the week before and the price at the art fair fluctuates. It could fluctuate Wednesday to Thursday. So that is something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Karen, what is your Wednesday at Art Basel like?
It's very frenetic. I typically will have 3 different clients. I try to keep it to 2, but business is business. But I go at 11 a.m. with one couple, usually the same one every year, and I give them a few hours and then send them on their way and run out and get another couple and do the same thing again. I don't know how much our audience knows about how the art fairs work from the gallery standpoint, but galleries send out previews to their good clients and to art advisors, and they're happy to sell every piece of art they're bringing before the fair opens. And sometimes they do. But a lot of times clients want to see something in person, so we can put something on hold, and then the galleries will give you 1 hour to look at it and decide whether or not you're going to purchase it. So the first clients that I'm with, we usually are running around to things that are on hold, and we can never really do it in an hour because sometimes it takes 20 minutes to get into the fair with security and lines and all that kind of thing. So it's a lot of running and there's a lot of stress, and they have to decide in a room full of 40,000 objects in 1 hour which few they're going to buy, and then look and have regret that they bought this and not that. So it's very stressful. And then I'll do that. You can't have anything on hold for the second clients, but still go around and see what's available. And then sometimes I do it a third time, which is a lot of work. And then I'm usually going to a dinner or a party that night. And so, keep my flat shoes on, have a couple glasses of champagne, and keep going.
There you go. That is you guys have just described the quintessential Art Basel Wednesday. That's absolutely perfect. I want to ask you, what do you do about client taste? It evolves very quickly in the beginning. How do you manage and grow and encourage client connoisseurship and keep them from chasing those bright, shiny objects in the beginning? How do you get them to get a collection where the works together mean something more than just each of them individually?
Did I take this?
Sure.
I would say that it is a challenge in some cases with certain clients, because they might sort of have it set in their head what they want and where they're looking. And I would say that it's something that you have to navigate very delicately. And it's definitely an open conversation of back and forth. And I would, every time that I sort of address something about the collection, saying, these are the 3 examples that I've chosen, and their reasons being because they align with the work you've already selected. Now, if you're looking to go in a different direction, then we can explore other options. But, it's sort of, you want to make sure that there's fluidity and consistency within the theme that they're working on in the collection. I think that that's important, because it's sort of, I always find that the identity of a collection sometimes reflects the client themselves or the couple. And it makes it so much more intimate because you're living with the art, and that's sort of part of it,
Yeah. Karen, I see a lot of people in the art world that look with their ears as opposed to their eyes. And I wonder how you manage that, because that's a big thing when somebody's getting started. They want to have, like I said, the bright, shiny object or the hot new thing or all that. How do you deal with that?
Well, I have become very comfortable saying no, which is not that easy, because sometimes you're insulting somebody's taste or their desires. And also, I don't get paid if I say no. But again, I have a long-term view of all my relationships, and I want them to be happy in the long run. So it happened this week, actually. A new client of mine saw something that was in a magazine, and she, sent me a photo of it. What do you think of this artist? And I'd never heard of him, but I looked him up, and I always say I'm snotty about where I let people buy art from the galleries. And this gallery was not in the gallery universe that I will transact in. So I had to very kindly say no to her. And we had a whole discussion about it. And she said, just say no. It's fine. You can say no. Don't hurt it doesn't hurt my feelings. You can tell me it's a crappy gallery or whatever. And I said, well, it's kind of a crappy gallery.
Well, the 3 of us, have been in this art world for a while, and you can't survive in this art world unless you are a little bit snobby about it, because decision-making, connoisseurship is the key to building a meaningful collection. And if you're going to spend money in a significant way, you want to have that money realized in a significant collection. If you're just buying things that you like and it's not important to you about value, I have 2 rules. One of them you touched on, Karen, and that is when people ask me, I say, go look at 10,000 objects before you buy the first one. And it's not that hard to do. Being online with the online viewing rooms, spending last week and the week before at the auctions, you're going to see 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 things. And so that's my first one. The second rule is, if you're going to spend more money than you would on a couch, it ought to be something you think about from an economic standpoint. But if it's a couch or less, nobody expects to make money from their couch. So, that's the rule that I give, the rule of thumb that I give to people. And everybody spends a different amount of money on their couch, so it applies to everybody. But I do think I think that's difficult sometimes when folks, they get excited and you've given them, a little knowledge is dangerous moment, I think, is the way that I would describe it. We've got some audience.
Can I add one more thing about galleries? There are tons of galleries all over the world, and when we talk about being snobby about certain galleries, one of the things that I pay attention to is how galleries treat their artists. First of all, that they pay them, but also how they view their careers. And most gallerists really want to foster the career of their artists and build them slowly, no matter how popular they are, and also control a little bit where the works go to make sure that nobody's going to flip them. But there are galleries that really pay attention to that, and some galleries don't so much. And so I will not let clients buy from those certain galleries. But a lot of times the galleries are selling works at the exact same price points, but curators and collectors only really go to, galleries that are Art Basel or at Nada or at our Untitled, not at, there's 25 fairs here in December and the curators don't go to all of them. So an art advisor can help you navigate through even which galleries are worth looking at, because that's the artists that have a much better chance to have good careers and end up in museums.
Yeah, that's a good point. Christina, one of the things I always found valuable was to not chase an artist, but to look for a gallery whose stable of artists had an aesthetic that aligned with my own, so I could build a strong relationship with the gallery by being interested in more than one of their artists. I wonder if you try to do that with your clients or with your own practice.
Well, I mean, I definitely have relationships, as Karen was saying, which is very true. It's like I have relationships with specific galleries that I've sort of developed these relationships over a long period of time and transacted with them and sort of know the ins and outs of how they work, and not only how they treat their artists, but also how they treat their clients, how they handle deals. Like all of that plays into the relationship quite a bit. I also think that a key thing that we haven't mentioned is due diligence with the type of work you're selling, especially on the secondary market. I mean, when you're spending a significant amount of money, this might not be so much when you're buying an equivalent of a sofa or less, but when you're buying above it, what would be an expensive sofa or, 6 figures or whatever it might be, I think the due diligence is really necessary. I mean, I've had several experiences with different clients who, are just getting into the market, have the excitement of seeing the shiny new thing and are at the art fair and feeling inspired and wanting to spend. And in one or two cases, they actually almost bought fakes. And it was because of my help and guidance that they were able to avoid that error. And like, it's a big mistake.
Yeah. People, people forget that this is, and I said it twice, I'll say it a third time, it's an unregulated industry. And it is really easy to, not to buy a fake. I mean, that's a thing, but it's very easy to not know what something should cost, has cost in the past. It happens all the time. So speaking of money, we're actually going to shift to the audience questions now. And we got a really great question from one of the Oolite board members, Maria Elena Angulo. She said, how do you address issues of future appreciation when the client asks, is this a good investment? Is this a good investment? Everybody always likes to use the old saw, oh, well, just buy what you like. But boy, your clients, if they can afford you, they're putting down a chunk of change in the art world. I'm putting down a chunk of change in the art world. What do you tell clients about appreciation and what is kind of your watchword? So Karen, tell us about how you deal with that issue when the client wants to know.
Well, it's a very common issue. But having worked in the hedge fund industry, I look at value and investment potential just in general. That's how I started collecting art on my own. So the evaluation and due diligence, as Christina said, that I do on artists and works and galleries, that I do for my clients is the same that I did for myself. But we have the conversation. I would never guarantee that anything is going to increase in value, but the way that I help my clients buy art, I feel at a minimum, the works will retain their value. So they might not be, the next whoever, but they at least will maintain their value and have some sort of secondary market potential. I have had people that come to me and just want to buy art as an investment. And I have worked with people like that before, but first of all, I think you have to transact at a higher level for that. You can't buy something at $5,000 and guarantee that that's going to be a good investment. That's like buying penny stocks. I also think that people should diversify their portfolio of art the same way they diversify stocks and bonds, because you don't really know one thing that's a sure investment. But also, when I've recommended art that I do think is a good investment to people, and they come back to me and say, but I don't like it. And I'm like, but that's a different conversation. You asked just investment, but it makes me happy that they also want to like it. So it just, it goes from there. It's, again, a conversation about what people want and exactly how they're looking at art.
I agree 100%. Christina, for me in the art world, the little secret about the art world is that if you do buy things that matter, the economics always take care of themselves. If you're buying things that are important in the context of the art world, history has shown that the value will be there. I think this is such an important question that I'd like you to answer it also. What is it that you tell your clients when they ask about future appreciation or if something's a good investment?
Well, I mean, Karen, again, it's great having another advisor here, because there's very similar thoughts in many things. But I would say that in regards to sort of emerging artists, I would say that the initial investment, it's given that they're lower price points, there is no guarantee if the artwork itself is going to appreciate in time. Now, there are examples where it's astronomical, like from one show to another, that it just skyrockets in value. But those can be also unpredictable, because it could go through a high and then drop and have a significant low within the next few years. So I would say that when it comes to buying emerging artists, I would stick to more like buying what you love and being happy with what you paid for it. And if it appreciates in value over time, that's fantastic. It's sort of an added plus. Now, when it comes from an investment point of view, more like blue chip secondary market, modern masters who hold, a fair amount of weight and are recognizable, like sort of recognizable names, I would say in that case, you are definitely guaranteed to be able to have it appreciate over time. It might be a gradual appreciation. It might be a significant appreciation, but it will appreciate over time for sure.
Yeah. One of our users wrote me about something that I don't know much about, and I'll ask you guys if you do, and it's asking about blockchain and whether you guys think that blockchain will help in terms of originality, provenance, and more transparency in the marketplace. I'm wondering if either of you want to speak to that question.
I can speak to that. It's not widely used right now for that purpose. I do sense that younger artists are more technologically inclined, and they are happy to have that sort of authenticity stamp on their work, which in theory is great, that you can trace it back, you can trace the provenance, you can verify the authenticity. I don't know that there's anybody that wants to go do that for every Picasso out there and Warhol and all those works. I think it's a big undertaking, and maybe over time it will become more widely used. But right now, it's not really a thing in the art world right now. But I think in the future it could be, and it's very interesting. But it's just not used right now for that in any.
How does Oolite Arts is really about working with emerging artists primarily. We have some mid-career artists who are gallery represented, doing very well, but it's primarily emerging artists. What does it take to to have an emerging artist get their work in front of an art advisor like you guys? Are you just operating in the top, thin layer of veneer of the art world, as I always say, or are you ever looking at emerging artists? And maybe it's important to define what emerging artist is to us versus what emerging artists might be to you. For me, an emerging artist is somebody that, if they're represented by a dealer, it's probably a regional dealer, they're out of school in the last maybe 3, 4, 5 years. Those kind of artists, did they ever come up on your radar? And if so, how can they improve their chances of showing up on your radar? Christina?
I would say that that's a similar definition. I have a similar definition of emerging artists myself. I would say that, yes, post-school, they're sort of just, kind of getting used to being out of school and learning about the dynamic within the art world and building relationships. And I think that it's been pre-COVID, obviously, it was a little bit easier for them to be able to network by going through to exhibitions and museum shows and kind of being able to network with, fellow artists who might be in a show themselves and be introduced to an art advisor at an event. That's happened quite a bit in the past with me. Now more so, I would say that I frequently look at Instagram, and I'm constantly looking at the feed and sort of spotting maybe there might be an artist that is highlighted by another art advisor or an artist that is having an exhibition. And so through that, I might develop, a connection or reach out to them if I have a client that is looking for particular work that aligns with that, or if it could be just my own interest. I mean, I also collect as well. I didn't mention that before. So it could just be that I'm interested in buying it myself. So I would say that social media has played a big role in that right now. I mean, Clubhouse is another one that I've sort of been recently introduced to. It's not as visual, but it has, allowed me to meet other artists, contemporary artists that way. I would say that it's, it is hard for you to break in to, to be able to be represented by a gallery for not already. I think that when you're wanting to build that relationship, it's really about a mix of things: luck, chance, and just being patient and developing relationships.
Just keep making work. Always be making. That's right. Karen, you and I have a similar relationship to the art world down here, and that is that we support it very heavily, but our primary, in my case, collecting, in your case, advising, is really elsewhere. How do you reconcile that? And if you're an emerging artist, what does somebody do to get you to at least pay a little attention to them?
Well, what Christina said is really the advice that I give to artists all the time, is to build the relationships and be sort of out at gallery openings, because that's where you meet people, and even networking with fellow artists, because if an artist is represented by a gallery, they're often asked to curate a summer show, and a lot of them put their friends in the summer show. And then if something sells, they start to build a relationship with the gallery. Maybe they are in another group show, or maybe the gallery gives them a solo show and then talks about representation. So it's really good to be sort of out. Networking, maybe not the right word, but building relationships with other people in the art community. And residencies, I think, are very important. And I'm not just saying that because of Oolite, but organizations like Oolite do a really good job of exposing the artists to the art community. And even right after I moved here, I immediately was invited to Oolite to do some studio visits. And it was great. I went to Bakehouse last night. I'm going to Fountainhead this afternoon. It's great to see all the artists, and I don't even know who they are right now. They're from all over the world, but when I'm there and engage and see the work and talk to the artist, it's just the best way to meet people.
Yeah, sometimes artists forget that the art world is really about showing up and supporting others. You can't expect that support if you're going to paint in your garage on the 5th floor somewhere and just wait to be discovered. It's really about getting out in the world and showing up and having other people show up for you. It really is an ecosystem, and you need to spend a lot more of your time as an artist being part of that ecosystem, as opposed to waiting for the ecosystem to come and just say, you're wonderful, this is it. So I agree with that. We have a really cool project going on our website. Speaking of emerging artists, it's called Collect, where beginning collectors can see works by these emerging artists that I was talking about, and actually buy a work for $500. I know I asked each of you guys to take a look at that website, which is oolitearts.com. oolite.org/collect. And how about some free art advisory services for our viewers? Was there an artist or two that you found interesting and maybe worth pursuing or would recommend on that website? What do you think, Christina?
Well, it's great that you mentioned it. I mean, I'm glad that Karen also mentioned Oolite since we're doing this talk with you and the residency programs, which is phenomenal. I would love to be able to come back and visit, but for the moment,
I'm issuing you an invitation right now. The next time you're in Miami, we will bring you in to do studio visits.
Well, I hope in December. I look forward to it. So I would say that I have been looking at Collect Online, and I think it's a brilliant idea. I think that starting with the $500 price point is a great introduction for anyone. And I would say that the two artists that sort of spoke to me were one was Colombian, Leo Castaneda, and then also Sarah Varas, the Cuban. And it's interesting because with Leo's work, I actually related to a lot of Cuban masters. I saw a lot of influence from like Jose Bedia in particular in his work, and sort of the overlaying, and it was sort of a mix of both modern and contemporary, because I also felt like he seeks inspiration from street art as well. So I was really drawn to that particular piece.
Fantastic. Leo just opened a show on, I guess today is Saturday, so Thursday night I went to his opening. He's got a new show. We miss having him as a resident. He was right outside my office, and I spent a lot of time in his studio. Now, Karen, you know this scene pretty well, but we've got about 12 pieces up on Collect. Anything pop for you? Anything make sense?
Well, I was actually going to mention Leo also because of the fact that he has a show now in a gallery, and for $500 you can own a unique piece of an artist that has an exhibition and is getting a lot of traction in many institutions right now. So for $500, I think that's a pretty good investment. And also Juana Valdez and Christina Pedersen have both recently had exhibitions at Locust Projects, which I'm going to give a shameless plug because I'm on the board of Locust Projects. But again, for $500, you can own a work by an artist that has been in an institution here and get started with somebody that already is known in the community and is having a career that's going this way.
Yeah, I think all of you made great choices. These are people who are artists that are emerging, but they really are starting to come out and have attention paid to them and getting in shows and things like that. So you're absolutely right. Well, I want to thank my panelists for sharing their expertise. Thank you guys both. It's been a really great hour for us to talk. I want to thank Cherise Crockett and Jessica Rivas, my Oolite Arts colleagues, for making all this happen. I just show up and start talking. And I hope everybody will join us again on June 12th for our next panel about conserving works on paper. Thank you all from Oolite Arts, and go buy some art. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.